by doing share screen. Pardon me while I tinker with all this stuff. I want screen to share. Okay, so it's now sharing. All right. Welcome to CSI, Computer Science, Computer Information Systems, Assembler. What are we going to get into? Well, we're going to get into a lot of interesting things. You will find on Canvas that when you go to Canvas, you'll see a book and you'll register for the book and it costs $77 for the semester. This is the book that we'll be using as our launching off point. I have not taught Assembler before. I know the content. What I think I might have trouble with is how do I present the material to where you can understand what I'm talking about. Because if I just threw you the hello world in Assembler right now and asked you to write some code, you'd be completely lost because Assembler is a strange beast, okay? It's a sharp tool. In other words, you can cut yourself, you can do a lot of damage, but it's also very powerful, okay? All right, so let's talk about some of the fun stuff in, let's see, let's go here. I want to change my speakers. Still too loud. Okay. All right. Anybody hear that? Okay, so that means it's not coming through. Okay, that's fine. This is a sound that's at 14 kilohertz, and it's basically the sound of a mosquito buzzing. And I could probably play it through a different speaker and you could hear it, but I can't hear that frequency. When it works, everybody in the room usually just cringes because it's so loud. I lost my hearing because I started off life as a music major. I played brass. And so now I have to wear hearing aids. So if I don't see your lips slapping, I probably can't hear you, okay? So that's part of the reason I have to wear the hearing aids is because I realized in the classroom, I was answering questions that you didn't ask. I just perceived I thought you asked that question. And I realized, okay, I better get my hearing checked. Come to find out, the differentiation in syllables like pat, cat, pretty well gone. So turn down your earbuds. All right, here we go. 1954. They said this is what the computer is going to look like in the year 2004. Do you think they missed it? So what's a computer really look like? Well, on your cell phone has more, your cell phone has more power than the Burroughs 1900 I started on, the mainframe. Well, this was actually not a real thing. This was a show that they had, a trade show, and they were showing some stuff, and they created this workplace. They kind of faked it. This is an old teletype machine, which is how you used to send data back and forth with ones and zeros over a phone line at 300 baud. That's an old TV, and that's actually from a submarine. And then at the conference, they actually found an old guy that looked like he was from 1954 and put him in front of there for the picture. So it was a hoax. But it's a great way to talk about how much we've missed on technology. Your cell phone, latest version of iPhone, has over 6 billion transistors. And in this class, we're going to talk about Assembler, and I'll show you a working computer with 2 transistors. So what if you need 6 billion for when you want to when I can show you a working computer that has 2? Fun. Okay. All right. Now, part of computer science is looking at things in a different light. And some of you have seen these things. They're called doodles or droodles. And they're simple little pictures that don't make a lot of sense until you find out what the answer is. And all of a sudden it makes sense. Okay. So I'll start with this one. And this is supposed to be two circles. Really simple. What is it? It's supposed to be fun. Don't be so serious. It's a butterfly jumping rope. Can you see it now? All right. And here's one. You may have seen this one. Right? Did I get the, yeah. It's a spider doing a one-arm handstand. Kind of funny looking, huh? Now, in the right, well, why is he talking about this? Everything that you do in computer science is ones and zeros. Everything. That's what we'll be getting into. So, what's that? It could be a worm jumping rope. You've got one on your computer. What is it? Power button. Can you see the 1 and the 0? How many saw that before right now? There's a couple of us that see that way. Okay, but ones and zeros is how we do everything in computer science. It's how you do your color codes. It's HTML and all stored on disk. And that's what we'll be doing in this class. And we'll be doing it in stages. Okay, so hopefully, because we'll be starting with binary math, and then we'll move into logic gates, and then we'll start getting into breaking down actual code, because I can demonstrate that when you run Python, Perl, Java, Bash, there is a virtual machine that is automatically runs in the background. And you can capture that virtual machine and see what the registers are and what is going on at a very low level. Is it stack-based or register-based virtual machine? This virtual machine idea is what revolutionized computing. Well, so we'll talk about some of the history, some of the things like jobs. What do you need to know for work? And so I'm going to close this. I leave it running so I can kind of keep track of my time. And I do everything on Linux, even though this front machine is a Windows machine. What I'm doing is that this is using a tool called KVM. And this is, if you go to DigitalOcean or Linode, you can get your own virtual machine in the cloud. And it's basically a virtual machine. And you can host your own web server for $5 a month. And I'll show you how to do all that if you are so inclined. Okay. You can also do it in your living room by opening a port through your router and being able to access HTTPS and HTTP through that. This class is going to touch on networking. It's going to touch on all kinds of things because it's all ones and zeros. Okay. And this is the VM that I'll be using. And so let me show you what I've got here. This tool chain that I've got here, this is an add-in for Windows. It's called Moby Xterm. Now, if you're in a completely Windows environment, you probably don't need this. But I have 30 years of industry experience before I started teaching, okay? And there's no such thing as one best operating system. They all suck, at different levels. Okay. I happen to enjoy using Linux because I have control. If it doesn't work, I can make it work. I don't have that option with Mac. I cannot justify the cost, and I can't do that with Windows. Some things in Windows you just don't have control over. You just, okay, I want to use a different window manager. You don't have a choice. You get Windows, you get the Windows GUI. That's it. Okay. All right. So some of the tools, let me go back to my very primitive notes here to find where I am. I'll use the back door there. Keep track of what I'm talking about. I will be using phillipsd.com. This is a Linode instance. And I have labs and additional things posted in this website that is not part of Canvas. Here's why. When I started teaching here, we had Front Page. If you remember Front Page from the Windows 95, Windows 98 day. And that's when they put things on the web. Then we had WebCT. Then we had Blackboard. Now we have Canvas. What's the likelihood that we will move to some other learning management system? 100%. It's going to happen. So I maintain my own stuff using static web pages, really simple, and it's mostly okay looking. Okay, hearing aids. Now I do recommend that you join the ACM. The ACM is the Association of Computing Machinery. It's for you. It's $19 a year. It gives you access to training videos, books. Yeah, use that door. That door. Yeah. Training classes, they have just changed how they do Skillsoft. So let's say I want to learn about a tool that I can't learn in school, like Puppet or Chef, Ansible. Well, now you can go to the ACM and learn that stuff. Okay. They're also implementing a strategic alignment with Pluralsight, which I happen to really like, because those are the tools that are actually used in industry. Like, hey, I need to learn React. Hey, I need to learn Angular. Where do I go to learn that? Well, you're not going to learn it here, but you're going to learn the basics. You're going to learn how to think, not what to think. So when you take those classes, they're teaching you what to think for Ansible and how to think when you do Ansible, which is what I use to control the lab in here. Okay. So basically, some little things. Use your student email. Please use Slack. I have Slack going to my phone. I've got 10 different computers I work on. So if you need help, Slack me and I'll answer you if I'm in front of a terminal. I'm pretty good about keeping the messages up. What is Slack? It's kind of like Discord. If you're a gamer, you kind of know what Discord is. Slack is also used very heavily in industry for communications. Okay. And it's a good tool to learn. It's easy to use. It jumps off to Zoom. So, hey, I'm having trouble with this piece of code and I don't know what you're talking about. I can actually look right at your class or share your screen and then see what you're doing and help you fix it right then and there. Okay, so that's kind of nice. But Slack is by far the easiest, best way to get a hold of me. If you're not registered, I send out links, even to those on the wait list. And in this class, I think I took everybody on the wait list, at least for day one. Okay. Now, this is some success tips, not just for school, but for life. This is stuff that I've seen in industry that is important. Okay. Show up. That's like 80% of your raise is just showing up on time and being consistent. Okay. Do the work, got to do the work, and read. You would not believe how many questions that I get. Students have not read the assignment and they wonder why they can't figure out the homework. Have you read this paragraph, second line yet? then they go back and read it and they don't bother me anymore. So there's the question about this stuff is nobody wants to work with somebody who says, how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you do that? You have to put in the time to figure it out and say, okay, this is what I've done, and this is the roadblock I've hit. Can you help me through the roadblock? Then your boss or your manager is going to talk to you. Okay. But if you always run into the mothership, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I do a for loop? I'm not going to teach you how to do a for loop. Go read the book. Okay. But hey, this for loop doesn't work in this situation because I'm indexing pointers. Different question. Okay. So that's what I mean by reading the text. You know, you have to own this discipline. This is a discipline you will spend your life learning. I'm learning it all the time. Most of what you see on the board today is stuff I did not use. And even last semester, some of it is, some of it isn't, okay? But these are the things that I've seen that are really important in your job, whether or not you are in IT. Excel. If you took Excel out of Foster Farms, the company would come to a screaming halt. It's the same way with most companies. Data gets munged somewhere. Somebody needs a specialized report. Hey, I need some GIS stuff. Oh, let's use the new version of Excel. Let's download my data, do a GeoPy lookup, and make a nice pretty map for the manager. You've just won because managers love color and charts, okay? Excel is not technically something you learn in computer science, but you should learn it because you're going to have to know how to use it, okay? And SQL, that's the structured query language that gives you the ability to push data in and pull data out of a database. This is becoming like the second biggest thing on a lineup. Hey, we're hiring a C++ programmer, but they need to know SQL. We're hiring a Python programmer, but they need to know SQL. It seems like almost all job descriptions are beginning to require SQL. And it hasn't changed much. It's gotten so much better. When I learned SQL, you had to write a lot of code, say like in PHP, to push and pull the SQL statements to the database. Now, with the modern versions of SQL, you can get rid of 200 lines of PHP code if you know the new versions of SQL. And depending on which your database is, whether or not you can use it. And also, you're all SQL administrators right now. You just don't know it yet. SQL has a database. It's called SQLite. How many have heard of it? A couple of you. That means you've played with it, low-level stuff. This is how everything's stored in your browser, on your cell phone. It's a database. It's usually one reader, multi-writer. It's small, it's embedded, screaming fast, and has all the modern stuff in it. And learning SQLite is definitely to your advantage as a programmer, because then you can create this universal data store if you're developing something in the web and you need to synchronize it with Mac, Linux, Microsoft, whatever, because now you have the data, okay? Very handy tool. It's called SQLite. Programming. I have 2 master's degrees. The second one was supposed to be a PhD, but my wife needed brain surgery. Life got in the way, never finished. So my second master's was in applied computer science. And I did collect some very, very interesting data. I can prove to you with numbers that if you learn how to program, it makes you smarter in everyday reasoning. Here's how I structured the test. I took students from a 201 class, which is Introduction to Computers, you don't learn coding, and Introduction to Programming, where you learn basic if, then, else, loops, sequence selection, and iteration, okay? The end of the semester, we did a pre-test and semester post-test. Post-test showed the scores significantly higher. Even the publishers of the test told me this is significant. If you talk to anybody that codes for a living, they say, well, yeah, duh. It's common sense that you can solve problems better. But it's not common sense or common knowledge to people outside computer science that programming makes you smarter in solving everyday real world problems. Why doesn't my car start? Okay. All right. And know how to read financial statements. This one's really important. I was working for a smaller company at the time called Tab Products, and they were doing some things with their accounting where they would not post the credit memos. And a credit memo is where you pay the customer back money that was wrong. Okay, so say like we overbilled them and we had to give them $20 refund. Okay, they were not posting credit memos and did this for an entire quarter. What's that do to your cash flow? Makes it look really, really good. Yeah, I thought I need to get out of here. And sure enough, 6 months later, the entire division was sold. All 60 people lost their jobs. They called me a rat for leaving. I said, well, rats are smart. They leave the sinking ship first. And business is rat eat rat anyway. You know, company loyalty is bought and paid for. Doesn't exist. You know, if you've got the skills to pay the bills, you're going to be able to find a job. Okay. All right. And know the power of compound interest, because I'm assuming someday you want to retire. Right. So compound interest is the way you say all that. Now, where are the jobs? And if you haven't seen this website, it's pretty cool. This is actually more for K-12, but this doesn't even include cyber. Cyber has so many job openings right now. And if you can pass a few entry-level certifications and show some street cred, like you know how to use Kali Linux and you can use some of the tools, you're going to get a job. Okay. Because there's such a shortage of qualified cyber. You can't learn cyber in school. You can get a foundation in school, but the tools change so fast and they mutate so quickly, it's very difficult to keep up. If you want a job where you learn it and you put the pencil in at the end of the day and you go home and forget about it, this is not the career field for you. I tell you that right now. This is not it. This is a job you live. Computer science is something that gets into your blood, and it's been my hobby since I started in it. I love this stuff. It's great, but I love to learn too. And we were talking earlier about gaming. I said I never had time for games because there's a new. Anybody know IP6 yet? What's IP6? Well, it's how the internet is moving to. So it's where the future's going. And that's the stuff I like to go learn, is where it's headed. Okay. AI, machine learning, so on and so forth. Very fascinating stuff. So this is promoted. And then the other one, I think, is it stats? It bounces over there. But there's just a ton of jobs. Okay. They're just going everywhere. So this is a great time to get into computing, because where we are with the cloud right now, they actually have a buzzword now. It's called take your enterprise, lift and shift. What's that mean? What's that mean to you? Hey, I'm a network admin and a DBA. Okay. Lift and shift means they take the entire enterprise, virtualize all their Windows machines, take Active Directory, put it out on Microsoft 365 Live. What happens to my DBA? What happens to my people that repair PCs? What happens to most people in small mom and pop IT shops? Where'd your job go? How do you keep your job? You learn the new stuff. You enable the lift and shift. That's just the way it is. If industry's moving that way and you want to be on the leading edge and learning new stuff, that's where all the interesting things are happening. I have 10 years on a database nobody even heard of. I couldn't even find a job for 15 bucks an hour on that database. Completely lost knowledge. But you see the ideas percolate up. You're going, so well. It was good while it lasted. Time to go learn something else. Okay. So that's very much the case. Okay. This this is kind of fun. This is truly your future. Hey, Pedro. Good. What do you think of the what do you think of my little blip here? Pedro's our dean now. So he's yeah. Got any questions? Ask him. Well, that's we're going to have a war. Is it going to go gray or fall out first? You bet. Good. It feels weird to be talking after 2.5 years of not being in here. Yeah, it's a little different. I can see some of them are already falling asleep, so I need to get a little more interesting, more jokes. You got any, by the way? You bet. You bet. Thanks, Pedro. All right. Now, this is kind of where your future is. Now, think of those really good jobs that pay $100,000 a year or more that are legal, W-2 issuing jobs that do not require the use of computing or computing technology. Like, I never thought of it that way. I've heard hairdresser to the stars. Okay. How are you going to manage your client list? Just fun baby. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. For the most of us, it doesn't exist that way. Okay. Anybody come up with something? There's been some, the illegal ones, Whoops, I closed the wrong thing. Darn it. Let me go back to open it. And go here. All right. Computational thinking. Okay. Trust fund, a lotto winner. Yeah. Professional athlete. That's sort of kind of true. Although you do need to manage your online presence somehow, maybe hire somebody to do it. But this is something that when I grew up back in the olden days where we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to school, we could work on our own cars. We learned how to twist wrenches. You don't have that opportunity because everything is computerized. You actually have to have a computer that plugs into your machine, your car, which is basically a giant computer, and you got to read all the signals to figure out whether it's good or bad. And if you've been to DEF CON or haven't, how many have heard of DEF CON? All right. If you've never been, go once in your life. It will open your eyes. It's completely amazing. It's like a giant circus. It's crazy, but they have a complete village dedicated to car hacking, where they come up with a Bluetooth device and something, and they steal somebody's key fob signal and start the car remotely. How do you do all that? How do you learn all that? Well, start by learning what it is out there, and DEF CON's a great place to go to find out what you can do, both good and bad, because it's a place for white hat and black hat hackers. And there's a conference right before it called Black Hat, where they actually publish some of the things that they've done. And this I thought was interesting. 2008, 50% of the federal workforce reached the age of 55. Okay, what's that mean to the federal workforce? Okay, now we're in 2021. Has anybody heard what happened to all the truckers? What happened to all the air conditioning, heating guys? What happened to all of the senior plumbers? What happened? They retired out and there's nobody in the queue. So there's a real need for that, people like that. Now, my view, I have my Class A driver's license. So my backup job is to be a trucker, right? But I know that the technology is going to get to the point where you won't need truckers. I can see it on the wall. Anybody can see the writing on the wall. So where does that leave you? Well, learn how to use the technology so you can help companies implement their self-driving fleet. Okay. And this is really why computing has taken off to such a magnitude in your generation. I don't know if you can see that, but that little red dot right there is the output of a fiber optic cable. That cable used to have to be that big. Well, the beauty of fiber is that once it's laid in the ground, all you have to do is change your switches and you get more and more throughput. This is why your neighbor is now in China or India, Russia, or next door. If you're gamers and you're playing Discord, you probably have people all over the planet that are on your team. Couldn't have happened without fiber. Now, let's talk a little bit about this. All right. So it's virtually zero cost to upgrade them. Now, Warren Buffett bought a railroad. Why did he buy a railroad? Well, he wanted to move coal. That's one thing he wanted to do. Where do they put all the fiber? Along railroads. In our town, there are towns around the country, like Colorado Springs and Salt Lake City. They are getting brand new fiber optic cable lay to the home. What's that mean? That pipe to my house. Well, years ago, you may have remembered there was a little town in Kansas, Nowheresville, and they named their town Google for 3 days. They won a competition, and that town got Google Fiber and all the latest and greatest stuff to every person in that town. What is that town now? It's a hotbed of innovation. something to be said for having appropriate bandwidth. Okay. We have a fat pipe into the campus. Amazing how fast you can download stuff. And there's point. Oh, I need to mention this fellow here. This goes back a couple years. You may not have heard about it, but this fellow was hired as a programmer at Facebook. He found somebody in China that could do his job 20 cents on the dollar. So he hired this Chinese guy to do his work. And so he was not doing anything and making 80% of his pay. Until Facebook security knocked on his door and said, why is somebody from China logging in with your credentials? GeoIP, folks. And he lost his job. But needless to say, without fiber, you can't do that. Okay. All right. So did you know China has more genius kids, that's IQ of 140 or greater, than we even have kids? That's pretty interesting. That's an interesting dynamic. So do your homework. Okay. Own it. And I can give you points about how to make sure your job doesn't get outsourced. If you are that person in the company that takes technology and you're up here and you understand business and you can communicate well with the other programming language we all neglect, English, because English is your programming one brain to the next. If you can communicate in business and translate effectively technical issues, you're at this precipice. You're not going to be outsourced. That's a very difficult thing to outsource. Project management is one of them. Okay. They call them business analysts, people who take the business process and they reanalyze it and see if it's going to fit within a technology problem or a technology tool, or is it a people process, or is it just not enough resources? Okay. Knowing how to do that is very helpful. My first MBA, I'll be frank, basically slept through it. I didn't find it very difficult at all, but I learned a lot of glossary, and that made me much better at my tech job because I could communicate with finance and accounting and management, and I could use their terms. It made my life so much easier. And besides, Foster's paid for it. They promised me a nice big raise and a promotion. Finished the master's. Nope, you're too technical. We can't let you out of the computer room. Okay. Oh, anyway, and sideways learning is just about what it takes to learn well. Now, I do want to mention this one thing about multitasking. Don't do it. Our brains are not wired for multitasking. If you tell yourself you're a great multitasker, you have just ruined your ability to drill in and focus. Coding requires flow state to be good at it. You need to get in that zone where things just flow and you know you're on the wavelength. And it just feels so good when you're there. And then you're solving all these massive problems that nobody can figure out. And then somebody says, hey, you want to go do this? Or, hey, you want to play this game? And it takes you hour and a half to get back to that flow state again. So it's very important to stay focused when you're learning. Now, there's tons of neuroscience that prove this point. You can go study it yourself. You can argue it till you're blue in the face. Facts don't change people's minds. Let me say that one more time. Facts do not change people's minds. You have a super strong belief that multitasking is awesome. and I come up and I give you this fact. Multitasking will ruin this. And here's the study. What happens to you? You put up your nukes and you're saying, I'm going to fight this because I'm challenging your assumptions. Stories change minds. Facts don't. So encapsulate your facts into a story that's meaningful to somebody else, and your facts will be absorbed. Okay? I can't stress that enough. This is why we see our political spectrum like this. Pardon? Yeah, story is story is whatever you make it. And it's like, how do you convey the story? Like some of you may remember what I'm talking about, some of you may not. But all I'm doing is I'm just kind of telling you my story. And for the most part, it's somewhat interesting. It's not great, but I get that. I'm not here to convince you one way or the other. I'm just telling you where I'm coming from. Okay. So there's a book that points to this. It's called Story or Die. And I read a lot. I don't watch much TV anymore. 900 channels and nothing still on. So, all right. Now, let's talk about logistics of the class. The way I'll be demoing the class, you will notice that everything in front of you, go ahead and wiggle the mouse and look at the machine in front of you. You will see that there is a login called guest. This login is a temporary login that if you try to save something, it disappears once you log out. Okay. It's just it's a very hacky set of bash scripts that sets up a temporary mount point so you can use the system. And then when you log out, it gets wiped. Okay. No big deal. There's another login called Jeremy or Tux, and that's used for actually maintaining state. So if you actually save a file there, it will maintain on that account. Okay. So as the semester moves along and you want to save things on the computer, use the same computer. You can move around. It's no big deal to me because I flush them at the end of the semester anyway. So I recreate them for the most part. There might be some residual stuff on some of the machines because I maintain them all remotely using some of the Linux tricks I've used. We will be doing in a big top level picture of how we're going to approach this class is step one. I want to bring out troubleshooting. Okay. This is a big deal. I spell terrible. I'm dyslexic. I was labeled mentally retarded in grade school. So that was a very interesting stigma to grow up thinking you're stupid when you realize you didn't know you weren't stupid until you realize, oh, I'm dyslexic. Oh, and it runs in families, you know, so my poor kids. So troubleshooting, but here's what I have found in my world of being in IT. IT is filled with people that are ADD, bipolar, even schizophrenic and dyslexic. Why? Well, our brains work a little differently. And you go to any company and you find their best troubleshooter, yeah, probably ADD or dyslexic or both. Now, why is that? I don't know. I haven't done enough research yet. But troubleshooting was one of the things I had to teach in industry to a room full of technicians. It was brutal. I tried to teach some of our technicians who were, how do I fix it? How do I fix it? How do I fix it? They couldn't think at all about how to solve the problem. Versus other ones that were top notch. They didn't need to be taught troubleshooting at all. They already knew it. But I was tasked to teach them troubleshooting. So I attempted to teach them programming because there was a tool that we used at the time where you programmed this optical jukebox in both the SCSI low-level language and assembly language equivalent for the serial port to make these big jukeboxes move up and down for optical jukeboxes, not sound, but for images, medical images. Well, people that could troubleshoot picked up on coding in a heartbeat, and people that couldn't troubleshoot couldn't code their way out of paper bag. Okay. Troubleshooting is a very difficult skill to teach. I'm going to attempt it to talk about the framework about how you troubleshoot. Basically, here's your problem, cut it in half, work on one side. Hardware, software. Well, how do you decide? Well, what's happening? Does it work with a different operating system? Yes or no? And then you start figuring it out from there, okay? So we are going to cover a little bit of troubleshooting, basically the big picture troubleshooting, because if you understand assembler at this low level, you will become a much better troubleshooter. But you have to know what troubleshooting is first, okay? And then we will move into things like binary decimal conversion, how to do adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing in binary. And maybe I'll teach you how to do square root in binary, all ones and zeros, how you do a binary add, binary subtraction, okay? It's all fun stuff. Then once you get this binary idea of how it kind of works a little bit, then we get into something called logic gates, the and, the or, exclusive or. Now, if everything I just said sounds like a foreign language, it is. But everything you do from day to day is built on these foundations. Okay. Next time I'll bring in my article about this fellow. On Wired. If you remember the F-14 Tomahawk, it's an airplane. My dad's a pilot, so airplanes are kind of a thing. And it was state of the art, way ahead of his time. And the guy that designed all the avionics, which was computers for the airplane, had a degree in electrical engineering and discrete structures. He actually invented the CPU as we know it today before anybody in the public knew it. But his story is forgotten because it was all patent protected. Okay. But because he had this strong understanding of electronics and discrete structures, he could move a signal, an analog signal, into digital and onto a small chip and reduce the weight. Digital to analog conversion, analog to digital conversion, okay? Now, some of you in this room may be able to hear the difference between a .wav file and a .mp3. Anybody? Okay, hold on to your hearing. I cannot. Why can some people hear it? I know some trained musicians that can hear it too. And Rob Peterson, one of our art guys, knows that. Is that when you take a signal that's analog, notice waveform.wav is really, really big compared to an MP3, which is really, really small. Why is that? Well, we break it apart. Does this ring any bells? If you've had your previous programming classes, you probably talked about this. It was probably one of those homework assignments you don't remember. But basically what happens is you set up a clock and a time, and you sample where the waveform is and represent it in ones and zeros, and you convert analog music into digital so it can be stored in MP3 in a much smaller thing. But you lose a dynamic range. You lose some of the frequencies. So they tell me. I couldn't tell you one way or the other, okay? How you do that is all discrete structures, okay? Is this going to go away? Machine learning. It'll, yeah, a little. Yeah, compression. Compression is never going to be old. They're always coming up with a new way of compression. There were some mathematicians that came up with an algorithm that beat a quantum computer. How'd they do that? Math, discrete structures. So the core of all this stuff is just ones and zeros, but then you put them together, add, subtract, and then, okay, we need to make our computer. And I will show you this one now, but just because it's so dang interesting. Let's see, I'll go to a new one here. Minor.org, I think. All right. This guy is amazing. Completely functional computer, serial port only, like the old terminals of 100 million years ago. 2 transistors. If you logged into Canvas and you see that funny symbol that's on our webpage, that is the circuit diagram for this board. It runs a simple game. It's a computer. How do you design it? All discrete structures. Okay. Pretty amazing that he did this. And I would say 60 to 80% of each one of those chips is not being used. He built it with commodity stuff that he could find anywhere. Okay. He didn't want to make it really fancy. He just wanted to prove he could do it. And I said, well, that's pretty darned amazing, you know? So, and you can actually buy this kit, and it does a calculator, and then you can actually run some simple games. But that's where he started it. Yes, computer electronics and computer engineering, that's this stuff. The software side of the world is computer science, IT, okay? And I started my life this way. I was one of those guys that carried a logic probe and actually figured out circuits and would replace bad chips and put them in. Well, that skill's completely gone. You don't need to do that anymore. How many took their VCR to a VCR guy? Well, maybe one time you did. You take your TV to a TV repairman anymore? Nope. What do you do when your computer died? Go buy another one. I thought, pardon? I didn't hear that. Yeah, I still didn't hear you, but that's okay. Yeah, it's okay. I have to turn my hearing aid down when I'm in the front of the classroom because my voice comes across way too loud. So it's like I feel like I'm yelling. So if I turn them down, then my voice is actually kind of in a normal place. If I turn them up, I talk too quiet. So I have to kind of, don't lose your hearing, is all I gotta say. Okay. But okay, now let's get into the fun things here. This is my main website, and there is some fun things here. This Modesto Junior College does nothing other than it takes you to the Modesto JC site. This is the lab. This is the lab. If you haven't seen this video, go watch it. Everybody that's a speaker in this lab is making bank. They're making really good money. There's one fellow who is working in security. He's ex-military, and he came out of the military with a secret clearance, not top secret. And it was worth his 4 years just to get that clearance because he walked into these jobs that are making $200,000 a year because of his background in security and in the military. Okay. And everything you see in the lab has been donated by Linode, who recently got bought. This is kind of cool. This is just a fun little blippy thing. It's a service. See those little red dots? Those are people that are coming to jeremy.org. Now, why are people in the middle of China coming to jeremy.org? Now, I can turn that off by using fail to ban. I can use, there's tools I can use to block that, but it's fun demo. GYP, that's what I mentioned earlier. It shows you the Latin long of where your IP address is coming from. So everything you do with your phone has an IP address. That's how they know where you are. Okay. The greatest tracking device invented. So they can get you to buy more stuff. That's really what it's about. Okay. All right. Let's go back one. And Canvas. This is the daily schedule. I find that this is a little more useful than what they post on the website, is that I can actually read this and it breaks it down by weeks and you see what holidays are there and so on and so forth. And if something doesn't refresh, since it's a static website, just refresh the page, okay? And I have some other stuff about Python on here because they've been doing it. We used to be able to do VMware for free for all students, which was awesome. But VMware has changed their licensing. And with our new dean, I haven't gotten the money yet. So I don't know if we will or not. But virtualization is a big deal. And I bring it into all my classes, kind of like SQL. It is a big deal. It's one of those foundation pieces that you build entire computer rooms on. Hello? With the proper tool chain, your notebook can spin up a $600 million computer room for 15 minutes and turn it off. And then you're only billed for that 15 minutes. This is why companies are doing lift and shift, because they only get billed for what they use, like our lights. How many people have a generator that run their whole house all the time, 24/7? No, we rent our electricity, right? Same thing, computing's going that way, okay? Money in the middle. Money is always in the middle, not the producer, not the consumer, in the middle. We were talking about mining the miners. Who got really rich during the gold rush? Was it the miners? No, it was the people that sold them all the things like shovels and picks and axes and burrows and whatever else they needed to go look for gold. Those are the people that got really rich. And in a capitalist society, money in the middle. Then I'll let you decide if profit's evil or not, okay? VirtualBox is what we will be using, kind of, sort of, maybe. If you want, play with it. It's a way to run multiple operating systems on a single machine. I am using something called KVM on my machine in my office because it helps you. I can run Windows, but not the latest, greatest Windows. I can run Windows 8, but I can't run Windows 10 or 11 because I have to run through some crazy machinations with the UEFI and put the protected secure boot in by doing all command line tools to be able to boot Windows on KVM, which is an open source thing. W3 Schools, this is a great place to go. How do I do the tag link again for an href? You go here, okay? They have all kinds of really good things at a very basic level, okay? They even have C++ on there now. It's like, hey, I want to do a for loop. They'll show you how to do a for loop in C++, okay? And once you log into Canvas, new class numbers, won't need that, join ECM. But this is my college career. This got me a job. I learned a lot, but not one single unit transferred. I had to start all over. I ended up with an AA in music here a long time ago, probably a very long time ago. Then I had got a 4-year degree in general studies, which is more liberal than liberal studies. It was the only degree I could get in a correspondence fashion where you'd listen to a lecture on a cassette tape, you take notes, read the text, make all your notes, go to the library, pay the librarian a $10 fee, show him who you are, and you sit down and take a closed book comprehensive exam. What you got on the exam is what you got on the grade. How would you like to do that? Now, here's what I can tell you. Do not take calculus that way. Things like history, sure. Things like principles of real estate, sure. Chemistry, no. Physics, no. It's a really hard to learn that on your own when you have no base knowledge to build on. Personally, where I am in my learning is if I want to learn something, I go get a book and I'll learn it, especially if it's in my discipline, because I have enough foundational knowledge to build on. What we're doing with you folks is that we are building you assembler language programming from absolutely no understanding of what assembler language is. So we are going to build the little parts first, okay? Hopefully it'll be a success. Even if we don't get that much coding done, the idea of being able to abstract it and think about it will help, okay? Help your troubleshooting. And these are just some of my certifications. I have a book, it's about that thick, of all my certifications. And when students ask, do you have your Linux Plus? They go, no. Do I need it? No. Should I go get it? If I was going to get back in the workforce, yeah, probably. But I don't think I'd waste my time with Linux Plus. I would go straight and get the highest level Amazon certification. So I could come in at a very high level and do the really cool stuff. I don't want to build, I don't want to fix old stuff. I want to do new things. Greenfield is new stuff. Brownfield is taking care of old stuff. When you get your first job, you're going to be doing brownfield. Get used to it. When you look at code, there's a big argument whether or not you comment code or not. I don't care what your feeling is. The job you get will tell you what to do. Some code bases, you never comment the code. You comment the ticketing system. That's where the history is. Okay. If you're working for a company like Foster's, you commented the code because you were developing in production. It was a very bad thing when things went wrong. They've pretty much moved away from that now. They've got that all figured out. And I'm really interested in just neuroscience in general, open source. Some of the things I do for fun. I'm a certified scuba diver. I fly paragliders. I'm a yoga instructor. So I got a lot of weird interests. I'm very quirky. I probably know something about something. And if I don't know, I'm very quick to say, I don't know. Why don't you tell me? But I love learning. Okay. This is why I'm here. And starting not tomorrow, but week after that, I'll be on campus Tuesdays, roaming the halls here, playing in the lab. So if you want to come by and shoot the breeze, play with some technology. If you're in the 210 class, you want to spin up a server, we can do that. Or I can show you how to set up KVM on your Linux box. We got, you want to set up a live distribution off a pen drive so you can plug it into any machine and have it run. I can show you how to do that too. The easiest one is Kali, Kali Linux. Anybody heard of that one? Security people, yep. Kali Linux is easy to put on a pen drive. Probably have a few laying around. And when you log into Canvas, let's see what kind of monsters we get here. Oh, you're not going to keep my passwords? Okay. That's because I haven't logged in yet. Did you see that DuckDuckGo is going to offer their mail system for free? So if you have a Gmail account, when you look at the end user license agreement, it says you give us the permission to look at your email, content included. Anybody know that? It's not private. If it's free, you're the product, and they're taking information from you to sell it to get you to buy more stuff. Ads. DuckDuckGo is going to make their email system available. So your email will be ilovechevy@duck.com. I think it's pretty cool. Security is beginning to get into the consciousness of Joe Average consumer, and Joe Average consumer doesn't really want to know that they're being tracked 24/7. But if you got a cell phone, you're being tracked. Okay. I took a forensics class this summer. Oh boy. It's crazy. All right. So this is our class. And I keep my classes really simple. You go to assignments and you work your way down. Okay. That's pretty much it. Okay. So we will be using a textbook online called ZY Books. It's an online textbook that allows me to move and rearrange things. This is actually 2 textbooks, and I'm hoping to get into a little bit of the RISC-V architecture, because that is, we'll just call it the next new great thing at the chip level. It's open source chips. You can design and build your own CPU. You burn it to FPGA. You can now build your own computer from the ground up to any specs you want. Big deal. And I'm hoping we can get into that a little bit. Maybe we won't get too far, but at least I'll expose you to what RISC-V.org is and where it is in the market segment. What really brought RISC-V to the market, this is not new technology. It's been around since when Intel and MIPS and PowerPC were fighting over who's going to be the best. The thinkers at Berkeley kept with what they call RISC, reduced instruction set computers, and then over the years they unencumbered it. So they have made an open source intellectual model for you to build a CPU. Intel is now on board at RISC-V or RISC-V.org. So is MIPS, so is AMD. So all the NVIDIA, all the big players that build chips are on board with this open source architecture. Why? Reduced costs. So you're going to have the next generation of computers. It's going to have a complete Ascension AI machine learning thing in your phone. It's going to be crazy. Great time to be into this business. Okay. So we'll talk about the troubleshooting, what it is. Information is bits, infamous 1 zeros. Okay. Arithmetic for computers, and then we'll see how that goes. And then we'll move into logic gates, or we'll go right into C and break it into assembler and then go back to logic gates. I'm not sure how that's going to work yet. So like I said, it's a matter of getting the flow right so you can learn best. Okay. So I'll need feedback. Okay. And then this takes you out to my website. And if you notice, I know that's really hard to see in the back, but the website to 273 takes you to phillipsd.com. When you go to phillipsd.com, you will not find a link to this. Okay. No real reason other than I don't want the robots from China surfing all the stuff that's on my website. Okay. So I occlude it. Can you still find it? Oh, of course you can. Yeah, it's not that hard. But nevertheless, I will be adding fun things for here. Okay. And these are some of the tools that I hope to get into this semester. NASM is a generic assembler that lets you write in pseudo English that allows you to target a RISC, a MIPS, an ARM, Intel. So you can write an assembler test and then port it, shall we say, export it to your hardware of choice. Okay. And then AS is another assembler, GAS is the GNU assembler, and GDB is the basically the GNU debugger. That thing is a beast. GDB is a beast. You need to learn it if you want to get really good because it works on all programming languages. You can use GDB with Rust. You can use GDB with Go. GDB has got a lot of money going into it to make it and keep it relevant. Because debuggers allow you to break into your code while it's running, inspect the memory, and see if it is what you want it to be. Okay. So knowing how to debug code at that level puts you at way beyond average. Okay. All right. And I'm pretty sure that's all I've got for the moment. So, any questions? Should never really do that at the end of class. Nobody ever raises their hand because they know if they raise their hand, class is going to go on and everybody wants to leave. So if you think of your questions, Slack me. If you're not on Slack, go ahead and join. It's in your email, providing you are on my roster. And on that note, we'll leave. So if you didn't sign in. This way I can find out who my no-shows are and then drop them accordingly. So on that note, let the adventure begin. Okay. So feel free to hang out and shoot the breeze, whatever. Okay. Class dismissed. Prop open the doors and oh. Sure. Is that what that one, the one you were sitting at? Yeah. Okay. Is it has a display issue? Okay. Is it like? Okay. All right. Because
Helen, I was in your summer classes.
you poor thing. You have to put up me for 3 classes.
And I was wondering if the Zybook tests are going to be self-paced.
Yeah, pretty much. But I don't have all the ZUI books out there yet. So I'm going to do this more, hopefully in modules rather than by chapter. But I want to see how the class takes to it before I get into the next level. So, I apologize. You have to listen to all my stupid jokes again. That's not yet. I think I missed that last night. I think I'm still working on that one. Yeah, it will be in a better state by Wednesday. Yeah, you bet.
Gotten my accommodations. Yeah, so
Okay. I'll work with you. Whatever you need, I'll do what I can to help.
so like everything like our labs and all that stuff's gonna be on campus, right?
All homework and